Hi, this is Margaret Byrd, and welcome to Color Quest, and welcome to the luscious garden here in Puebla, Mexico. I am finishing up my last few weeks here on my artist residency, and I have been loving what is growing in this garden because there's so much natural color. Today on Color Quest, I want to look at the leaves of some of these plants. I've been very inspired by the unique shapes and the large size of some of the leaves that are here, and although I don't know if they're going to share a specific color, I do know that in an eco print environment they'll at least share some of their beautiful shapes. The flowers of some of the same plants in this garden have brought about beautiful color both in the dye pot as well as in last week's video where we looked at a very simple flower eco print. But the leaves, I think I'm going to give them an environment to really take advantage of the shapes, and that is using a tannin iron combo. So I will be picking some of the leaves, and with the help of an iron blanket, I'm hoping that we will find some beautiful designs purely from the shapes of these incredible leaves. So let's get started. Before we go select the leaves, we need to prepare our fiber. And there's two things we need to do. One is that our fiber that we're going to be using for printing, we're going to put in a tannin bath. That's going to react beautifully with the second piece of fiber that we're going to put on top, and that is the iron blanket. I'm going to be making two prints, one using silk as the fiber and one using a very lightweight cotton. I'm going to be treating both of these in a tannin bath. Then I'm going to be making two iron blankets. I'm going to be using a heavier weight cotton. This is the only cotton I have that's heavier weight. You can use something that's like terry or jersey material, but something that's got some substance that will allow there to be a little cushion as you're using it to cover your fiber on which you're going to be printing. Those are going to be treated in an iron bath. Now the tannin bath and the iron bath are going to both be at room temperature, but I will need to heat some water in order to dissolve both the tannin and the iron. Tannin is at 10% weight of fiber. I do not have the weights of my fiber, so I'm just going to wing it. So for example, if you have 100 grams of fiber, you're going to want to use 10 grams of tannin in order to make your bath. For the iron, as you probably have seen many times, we are going to use just a pinch of iron. It doesn't take very much. I don't have a teaspoon here, so I'm just going to pour it in and let that dissolve, and then introduce the two pieces of heavier weight cotton. The tannin bath needs about an hour to soak. The iron bath only needs about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, just to get saturated. So first I'm going to make the tannin bath and get that going, and then we can go pick our leaves. So here is the tannin that I'm going to use. Gallo tannin is great. I get it from Botanical Colors, and it is a neutral color, so it is the lightest of the tannins that you can use, so it shouldn't discolor the fiber very much. And iron powder. This is also known as ferrous sulfate. It is the green powder. I like to buy mine from Botanical Colors or make my own homemade. I have a video here where you can watch how easy that is to do. If you've got some time and some rusty nails, a little vinegar, you're good to go. However, I'm going to be using these today to make my two baths. just had a huge rainstorm, rolling thunder forever. And now everything is nice and clean. So I'm gonna go ahead and hunt down some of these beautiful leaves and cut them for the echo print. Here are the shapes that I've decided to use. This is a geranium. I know geranium leaves can make some kind of a color. Oh, and look, my snail friend is coming to visit. He's probably gonna munch, maybe. All right, I have to go cut a different one. So I've set up a place on this shelf here where I can build the design. I've got my tannin soaked silk that I'm going to do first, and my stack of leaves over here. So I'm just going to start to lay them out in a kind of random design, and then we can cover it with the iron blanket. First design is done. I'm going to grab the iron blanket now, put it over the top, roll it up, bind it, put it into the steam pot. Both of these have now been wrapped up. You probably noticed that I wrapped them in paper, and that is to protect the fiber from getting marks from the binding string. Now, I've used this paper here, and it's got a shiny side and a dull side. And with the flowers that I did last week, this was just too thick for some of the steam to come through. But with leaves, I'm gonna be steaming them for quite a long time. So a minimum of 90 minutes, but I'm hoping that that's gonna protect from having those string marks. Remember, when you're binding for echo printing, you wanna make sure that your string is tight. The tighter the roll, the more contact can be between the fiber and whatever you're printing. So I'm gonna start binding those up so we can get them in the steam pot. Let's talk about the results. Definitely different than I expected, which is always a great thing to be able to share. So everything was much lighter than I expected. Now, I did a bunch of echo printing while I was down in Peru using the same techniques. Tannin soak for the main printed fiber and an iron blanket, and I got completely different results. So I thought it might be interesting to look at that, but then also to talk about some variations and maybe why things were different. First, I'm going to show you the silk piece, and I'm going to show you as compared to a silk piece I did down in Peru. Here is the piece that I just did. I expected the background to be much darker. And let me show you a piece that I did in Peru. Same technique, silk. I had the leaves, and this was the background. This is what I expected. So this is the combination of the iron and the tannin on the silk. That really didn't happen on this piece of silk. I did, however, get some color from one kind of leaf. This one's a little brownish. And I got a nice iron outline on this. The leaf itself was the geranium leaf, and I got a little bit of green. So the geranium leaf and whatever that larger sort of heart-shaped leaf is definitely has color in it that transfers. So I have to think about what happened to have such a variation, besides just doing it a different time. Then, if you look at the cotton piece, which I would have expected to be lighter, it's almost identical to the silk piece. But in some ways, these came out a little bit clearer. And even on this one, I got some really nice dots and things in this particular leaf. I guess I did get some dots in this leaf. So that might be interesting to look at again. That's a decent iron shadow there. And I got some darker colors here. Here is the color of that leaf. Same larger heart-shaped leaf. Definitely transferred color onto here. So, interesting. Now, look at the actual iron blankets. These turned out so much stronger. And actually, this to me is more, I don't want to say successful because that's not really fair, but it's really vibrant and you got so much more of the print here. So here's one of the iron blankets. Here is another iron blanket. And I like how the ghost prints on these turned out better. You can much more easily see. Now this is a thicker cotton and it was all doused in iron. Iron's going to be a stronger mordant regardless, but got some nice shapes here. So the other piece is I got prints on the barrier paper, and those in some ways were almost stronger even than the silk. Yeah, very, very interesting. All right, so what are some factors, some differences of things that could impact it? Let's talk about the mordant number one, okay? I soaked these in tannin for about an hour. I recall that in Peru, I soaked them in the tannin bath overnight. Not on purpose, I just threw them in, forgot about them, and then worked on them the next day. So the length of time that these pieces of fiber were in the tannin bath could absolutely make a difference. And that would be one that I would suggest is a factor in contributing to the lighter results on these two pieces of fiber. Okay, number two, don't think there was much difference in the iron. The iron blanket actually printed really well and even better than the target fibers. And I think I soaked the iron blankets about the same amount of time. I didn't let my iron blanket in Peru soak for any longer than probably 20 minutes. So that was about the same. I might have even let these soak a tiny bit longer here. Another difference is the barrier that I used. Now, if you watched last week's video, I used this paper that has the shiny side and the dull side on a flower echo print, and it was really hard for the color to come through, and I sort of attributed that to the paper as being too strong of a protective barrier from the heat itself. I used that same paper here, and although I heated these for a lot longer than the flower piece from last week, I still have to wonder if that barrier paper wasn't keeping the fiber more protected from the heat. That's obviously going to make a difference. Another thing is that I'm always using string to bind, and then concerned about having that ring that happens if you don't have some kind of protective barrier. And I think moving forward, I'm going to look at using some kind of cloth to actually bind so that I have a very even and extremely tight bond. Certainly having those lighter sort of lines and designs through indicate that the fiber is not touching the leaves, and so it's not being printed on. So although I like that sort of patterned look, definitely I'm attributing the tying of that to not having a super solid print. So that's something to consider. I did the same both in Peru and here. I've never actually tried it with a piece of fiber. I think I'm going to try that in the future. We'll see if that makes a difference. I'm guessing it will. And then finally, heat. Now, I had much stronger heat when I was in Peru. I had gas, and I got my steam to a rolling boil for the entire time. As a matter of fact, I kept boiling the water off. Here I'm using electric heat, and I'm using 2 small burners to try to create heat. And I'm thinking that another difference is that I'm not in a super hot, steamy environment, or at least as hot as it could be. I was able to reach in and turn things, and you wouldn't be able to do that if it was like a true hardcore steam, right? So that is also a difference. So with all of those things, you can see how many kinds of environmental changes that can make an impact. So always great to share with you. When things like this happen, I like it. It's different. It's different than maybe what I expected. And I'm learning every time I do this. So I hope that will encourage you to try some of these things out, consider all of those different factors, and then see what you get. I think that's always the best way, regardless. Okay. It is time to move beyond the walls of this incredible garden that has brought me so much natural color fun over these last few weeks while I've been on the second half of my artist residency here in Puebla, Mexico. So next week on Color Quest, I'd like to look at a dye material that is very common here in Mexico and has a long history, and that is indigo. I'm going to try to build a new kind of indigo vat while I'm here to just celebrate the beautiful blues of Mexico. And maybe it will inspire you to do the same. So have a wonderful week wherever you are. Thank you so much for tagging along during all of these weeks as I travel and learn so much more about natural color. And I can't wait to see you here next Friday on Color Quest. Look at my snail friends. They're munching the leaves.